do you like the feeling of power you have as a newspaper proprietor of being able to sort of formulate policies for a large number of newspapers in every state of Australia?
Well, there's only one honest answer to that, of course, and that's yes. Of course one enjoys the feeling of power. The newspaper can create great controversies, stir up arguments within the community, discussion, can throw light on injustices, just as it can do the opposite. It can hide things and be a great power for evil. It's not a perfect system, obviously, but can you think of a better one?
Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Murdocracy, the podcast that keeps an eye on the news and influence of News Corp, the most influential media company in the Western world. I am Cam Wilson.
And I am Sami Shah.
Sammy, have you got your booster shot yet?
I have not. I actually don't qualify for my booster shot until February under the current system, right? Because currently we're at 5-month wait. Yep. And it's scary because I'm AstraZeneca. So according to some of the research, apparently AstraZeneca are not that effective against Omicron. So I'm masking like crazy now. But yeah, I'm desperately keen on getting my booster shot as quick as possible.
Oh yeah, big time. I've got mine booked for next week, just before Christmas. Not too soon. I was worried about having the symptoms over the Christmas break. But interesting, I don't know if you've run into this as well. My whole end of year Christmas party celebrations, that kind of stuff, and going into family arrangements over the Christmas New Year's break has become very strategic. I'm constantly weighing up. I'm like, what are the chances that I'll catch COVID here? Is this person who I'm going to meet up with at this event? Is this a COVID safe venue? Is this a COVID safe friend of mine? Do I trust them? And we're getting pretty close to Christmas now. So if I catch it, I'll probably have to be in isolation. So, is it even worth it to go out and get coffee? It's all going out now has become almost like an epidemiological calculation in my head.
Well, I know there's a friend of mine in Sydney, the comedian Gabby Bolt, and she just right now announced that she's cancelling the rest of her shows. She had shows, today, tomorrow, and everything, and it's because she's worried about people, just freaking out about COVID risk because of this whole Omicron stuff. So I think we're back to, we have that thing every time lockdown ends, we go, finally, we're free, and then we are reminded that no, we're still living in a pandemic. You can leave your house, but do you really want to? So yeah, it's a negotiation we're having to make every day.
Yeah, it feels like it's now we've really just decided this pandemic is now a problem for individuals. If you don't want to catch it, that's on you. The best way not to catch it is to not go outside or whatever. But at least particularly in New South Wales, where Omicron or Domicron, as I've seen it called online, is obviously spreading rife, and numbers are increasing by crazy amounts just before Christmas, before everyone travels around the country as well. I don't know. I do think this is endemic now. I do think COVID is just something we'll probably have to deal with in some way or another for quite a long time, maybe forever. And I'm sure it'll become less and less potent, and our vaccines will continue to get better. But right now, it's in the very uncomfortable time where it's well, I'm not gonna completely hide out, but also I don't really feel safe personally by being whatever. So I'm a bit stuck.
Yeah, well, I've been listening to Alan Jones's new live stream YouTube show because I was researching for my own podcast, News Weekly, and he's he's very against vaccine mandates, as is his frequent guest Pauline Hanson. So you know what? I'm just convinced by their argument, which is forget it, just let's move on. This whole thing's fake.
I know, I'm bored of it too. All right, so just some housekeeping before we get into all of our good stuff. First of all, as always, thank you so much to our patrons who support us doing this. If you do want to support us, it means a lot. We pay for hosting costs and our time. It's patreon.com/Murdocracy, MURDOCRACY. The second thing is we will be taking a summer break. We're traveling and we're all over the place, or at least I in fact, both of us are. We're going to go out and, speak to the people on the ground, see what's happening out there and report back. But that
probably
means
catch Omicron, basically.
Exactly, yeah. And we'll have a first person account of what it's like when we come back. our next episode will be on the 16th of January. So I think that's 3 weeks off. So, stay safe at the time, enjoy some good Christmas and holiday cheer, and we'll see you then. And my final thing before we get into our episode, which is, by the way, we're just going to mailbag. We got a bunch of questions that listeners wanted to hear. We're going to answer them and kind of go through them. Some about Murdoch, some about ourselves. So I'm looking forward to that. But the final thing is, if you could, we would love you to leave a review for our podcast. And I want to give all our listeners a little bit of a challenge, because let's spice it up. Let's make this interesting. If you're listening, how about you leave a podcast review in the style of an Andrew Bolt column? I want you to really lean into it, like the one of the main spokespersons for, one of the main personalities of News Corp, and tell us what he would think of Murdochracy. I think that would be a fun thing to do.
Basically, what we're asking you to write is that Murdochracy will bring about the end of Western civilization.
Yes, and replace all white people.
Yes, exactly. The great replacement.
On to News Corp News of the Week. And the first story is, wow, it's more proof yet that we really do live in a Murdochracy. The new head of Australia's competition and consumer watchdog is a long-time insider with the Murdochs. Gina Cass-Gottlieb is more than just a lawyer who's worked for Lachlan Murdoch. She's also a director of the Murdoch's Family Trust, which is called Crichton Financial Services, with a 12.5% vote over it, as chosen by Lachlan Murdoch himself. She is now the head of the ACCC and will have a lot of power over, for instance, acquisitions and different decisions by this very important business government body. Sammy, what do you think that it says about this government, our country, that such a powerful person who is currently literally, enmeshed in the Murdoch empire is now going to be one of the top jobs in Australia?
Well, okay, so there's a mixed thing here. One is definitely she's obviously got her relationship with the Murdochs in terms of Lachlan Murdoch, and have had a fairly involved working relationship in the stuff she's been managing, like the Murdoch Family Trust with a 12.5% vote. Prior to that, she was also been working as a lawyer in this area of in corporate law and competition law and everything like that. So, there's obviously been, if you work in corporate law in Australia, you're going to obviously end up at some point working with or for or against the Murdoch empire. There's a thing I found, which is Alan Fels. He is a professorial fellow at the University of Melbourne, but he also used to be the chairman of the ACCC from 1995 to 2003. He's a big fan of Rod Sims, who's the previous chairman. Rod has been, I think, the chairman for several years now. And he's written an article for The Conversations pointing out how much of a fan he is of Gina Cass-Gottlieb, and also that she is deserving of this spot given her work experience, and he's put her forward himself many times over the last few years. And he says it's largely down to her experience in competition law. It's down to the fact that she's helped so many companies navigate competition law, that she knows where the loopholes are that need to be fixed. And that's the argument he puts forward. It's a bit convincing. There's definitely some merit to that. But at the same time, will she be divesting herself of the 12.5% vote in the Murdoch Family Trust? Because it does seem to be something of a conflict of interest, if you will, between herself and the ACCC.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think there's no question that you have to kind of get out of something like that. Can I be more cynical? I think that it is crazy that something like this is happening, and I know that if you are Australia's a small place. If you are involved in competition law, you are either working for the big dogs or against the big dogs, as you say. But it's crazy that the person who we chose is the one who has been working and is still at the moment working for those big dogs. Some of the biggest dogs in the world. I don't know. I mean,
look, there's also and I know there's another aspect, all right, which is worth considering. I call this the Rita Panahi principle.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, all right, so the Rita Panahi principle is something I've entirely come up with, which is the idea that a woman of color is hosting a primetime TV show on a primetime TV channel, but we don't give her credit for the diversity achievement that it is, because of the politics involved, right? And all those things. Similarly, this is the first time a woman is going to be the top dog at the ACCC. It's a pretty big achievement to have the chair be a woman after, since the ACCC's existence started, basically. So I think there's a level of credit that needs to be given there, but it might not be given because of her association with Murdoch.
Yeah.
So that just something to pinpoint.
That's true.
That's all.
But that's interesting. And can I actually, what you've raised there is a very interesting point. And this is something that's coming up in politics a lot at the moment as well, where, we're totally in the time where it's not okay to not be in some way diverse, right? Like, even conservative politics is kind of acknowledging that they need at least the appearance of diversity. But I find it with this, and I don't know enough about Gina's specific politics, and I don't know how it would affect the ACCC, so don't take this as a comment directly on her, but more about the idea of like representation, which I think is an admirable goal. And I should also say I'm a very white man, so like, you can probably critique me from that. But the idea is that there are people who exist who are, represent diverse demographics who don't necessarily bring, I think, like, diverse perspectives to politics. And so, for instance, a great example might be like, Julia Bishop in the Liberal Party, who, is a woman, but was like a, kind of an avowed like non-feminist. And so, technically, she improved the amount of gender diversity in the Liberal Party. Did she bring in a lot of pro-women policies? I think that you would be really a stretch to kind of find that. I think when we talk about diversity, you can't just, I think it's tokenistic just to bring someone in who kind of represents the same, potential views, but just happens to be, a different gender, a different race, a different, like, whatever. That being said, I still think, diversity is important, but like, I think we are getting to the point where we need more than just the fact that like it's a woman who's appointed to the head of the ACCC. I think like one thing that I do think that was convincing from my colleague at work, Bernard Keane, is he wrote, "This appointment is a gift to the Murdochs to ensure their loyalty in an election campaign, to indicate the government will continue to assiduously look after the local interests of the Murdochs, as it has been doing in the campaign against Google and Facebook based on the lie of stolen content, which is reaping the company tens of millions of dollars." I mean, look, Bernard is one of Australia's like leading cynics, and I don't think he would begrudge me for saying that. But I mean, like, viewed in that kind of context, we have seen this government do a lot for News Corp in the Murdoch empire. The news media bargaining code was an incredibly pro big media, particularly News Corp policy. They've done other stuff like, given all these grants and that kind of thing. Viewed through that lens, maybe it's ticking more than one box. Maybe, like, I'm not saying that Gina isn't an incredibly capable person, but there are many incredibly capable people out there. It just so happens that this happens to shore up one of their allies for an upcoming election.
Look, there's definitely that aspect. And all right, so I'm going to say two opposing things about this appointment. The first is that there is, and Bernard Keane has pointed this out as well, there's a very good chance that this was a gift to the Murdochs from Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, who's responsible for her appointment, to say that, look, here's someone from your inner circle in charge of regulating your industry now, and that's, a boon for the Murdoch empire. But also, it hopefully helps Josh Frydenberg stay in the good books of the Murdochs, especially after the whole job seeker, job keeper debacle, and maybe gives him a leg up against Peter Dutton, who's seen as king in waiting when it comes to the Liberal Party. So I think that's one argument that can be put forward against Gina Cass-Gottlieb's appointment. There's another aspect, and this comes from my own personal experience and everything, is, when I was working at the ABC, for example, I used to get criticized by a lot of people in the Australian and conservative political media, where they said, well, Sami's a leftist. Sami Shah is a leftist, and so clearly all of his coverage will be leftist, and his politics and as a journalist would be leftist. And my argument always was, look, When I was in Pakistan, I was, I'm obviously not the Taliban, but I was responsible for interviewing as a news producer members of the Taliban, extremely conservative people, people who for many reasons would want me dead for my own belief system. But as a journalist, I gave them the same level of fair shake, equal treatment as I did anyone else, as much of an unbiased coverage as I could. There's a level of professionalism that people who work in professional fields have to have. And, we obviously allow for personal bias and stuff, but maybe Gina Cass-Gottlieb, being so high up in the Murdoch empire, is down to her quality of work and professionalism, and she, when appointed to this role, will be just as professional.
I think you are giving a level of taking people at their word, which I like. I like to think that that's the case, and so I'm crossing my fingers for that. Hey, our second story today is about News Corp is looking to dive into one of Australia's favourite pastimes, gambling. Nine Papers' Zoe Sammis and Chris Root write that Rupert Murdoch's News Corp Australia is in the final stages of securing a wagering partner for the launch of its bookmaking business, with 2 local outfits and an international company competing to take part in the joint venture. Now, they already have some involvement in gambling in Australia, but this is kind of a really big step to trying to make it a big part of their business. Sammy, what do you think about a company with so much control over entertainment and content and really Australian culture deciding to go all in on gambling?
It's a really weird thing. So in America, they already own FoxBet, which is a betting service as well. But FoxBet isn't as large or as influential as it's an alternative in Australia would be. And that's largely because gambling's role in Australia, I have never understood why a country that takes public health so seriously and involves itself, with taxpayer pays for one another's public health because of a Medicare system, which is a good thing, has allowed such a free rein to the gambling industry. To me, it makes as little sense as the American obsession with guns, for example. And when I've brought this up in public forums, I've had very senior journalists tell me, yeah, but what about all the jobs? And my argument's always been, well, if that's your only defense for the gambling industry that brings in a lot of jobs, let's allow cocaine to be legal because cocaine industry does a lot of hiring. It just doesn't make sense to me. So if there's so much money to be made and so much influence to be had in this country through the gambling industry, then of course News Corp is going to make a move into it. It makes complete sense because they know that their biggest power comes from wielding political influence. And, gambling industry has a lot of political influence as well, alongside the news and all the other things that News Corp's kind of dipped into. They're the masters of diversification. And this seems like such an inevitable decision.
Yeah, I think you're right. Australia for quite a while actually had a more expansive or it allowed more online gambling, particularly to do with sports, than the US did. And that kind of got overturned in the last few years. And they've seen this explosion in gambling. We've obviously always had like pokies and that kind of stuff where the pokey capital of the world or whatever. I mean, look, I kind of personally, I flip between two perspectives on gambling, which is like, I like the idea that adults can do whatever, but particularly things like poker machines, like apps for your phone, which are gambling, like they just like, they're like, they light up your brain in a way that, nothing natural does. Mm-hmm. And I almost think that they're like, we need something to kind of deal with them because the way that they just like manipulate, our base psychology, I think is just like, so I don't know. I think it's really dangerous and damaging. But yeah, I mean, like you're right. Like, where there's money to be made, these guys will make it. And I think, the one thing that I've seen with this explosion in the US, and I talk from the experience of watching the NBA a lot, which has recently gotten into it, is it just feels so insidious about how what was an entertainment product and obviously has always been for selling things, but how because there's so much money in it, it becomes increasingly like normalized where people are talking about like betting odds. They talk about sport through the way that like, the Brooklyn Nets are 2-1 favorites to beat, the Denver Nuggets or whatever. Like how it becomes just such a core part of it that I don't know. And, that you see it, how it affects young people. You see how it affects like vulnerable people who don't have the money to spend on that stuff. the kind of, I guess, the Puritan in me just like kind of thinks about it and just like, I just kind of, I wish that wasn't the case. I kind of hope that it doesn't do too well.
I like the only defense we have at this point against them is I hope it doesn't do too well.
Yes, sad. Hey,
Yes.
There's some further developments on our favorite topic, which is, Matt, I'm speaking for both of us, but maybe me. News Corp is forming its own division to focus on partnerships with tech giants, and that's according to Ad News. We've spoken a bunch about this and how we think it's one of the undercovered parts of News Corp's success at the moment. Specifically, we spoke about how the former head of the Australian, New South Wales, ACT, and other prestige titles, Nicholas Gray, got given this position to head that up. Well, now he's got this new division under him, which he says is going to be for negotiating and implementing deals, growing relationships, and further developing our platform distribution capabilities across social media, SEO, and some other stuff as well. That was a direct quote with him announcing this new department. Sami, the first thing is, should we do a little victory lap about being right about how this is actually a really big thing?
Well, I was thinking we deserve to do Victory Lap just based on the finale of Succession. Because, I mean,
Spoilers!
big spoiler alert. But yes, if the large theme coming out of that is the way, the Waystar has been involving itself in big tech. And largely, if you think about the whole story of the 3 seasons so far, has been their decision or the realization and slowly that they need to go into big tech because otherwise they're going to be dead as an old media industry. And it just seems to be something that, Rupert Murdoch realized a long time before his counterpart in Succession did, because they've been doing this for a while. They've been investing for ages, and it's key little things like audience development and SEO that make a difference. I mean, I told you I was watching the Alan Jones live streams for the last few days, and the numbers on those are abysmal. My News Weekly podcast has more listeners or viewers than Alan Jones's podcast does at this point, or his live stream does. And so,
and fair enough.
But the thing is that he was part of the Sky News family, and his content when it went on YouTube was capable of having hundreds and thousands, if not millions, of views because they've invested so much time and money in SEO and audience development. Whereas now that he's on his own, he's probably going to realize just being on the platform doesn't guarantee an audience. If you build it, they will not come. News Corp realized a long time ago, you have to build bridges for audiences to cross over, and they're now becoming masters of doing that.
Yeah, and I think the real takeaway from this is, of course, that we are also setting up our own division to focus on tech giant partnerships. So if you are interested, please apply.
That's right, absolutely. We can't pay you any money at all. In fact, you'd largely be giving us money if you do it. But, we think it's a great deal.
Yeah, exactly. We'll pay you an exposure. And finally, now, Erin Molan may not be running for politics yet, but she actually has made one move that makes it, in my opinion, a little bit more likely, and that is signing with Sky News. Just last week, the sports presenter, who is a bit of a household name, I think, said that she had been approached to run for the Liberal Party in Eden-Monaro, following the footsteps of her father, who is a former Senator Jim Molan. She turned it down, but said she does have political ambitions. At the same time, the former co-host of the Footy Show called off negotiations with Nine to become a primetime talent with none other than Sky News. Sami, in your opinion, is this the making of a future political superstar?
So, yes, given the fact that she's Jim Molan's daughter, in and of itself, she would, and he's having stepped down now, and he has stepped down because of his cancer. She would seem like a natural person for the Liberal Party to approach to replace Jim. But I'm not big on sports news and sports broadcasting overall in terms of I don't play sports, I don't watch sports, I have zero interest in it.
I had no idea.
She is really a household name.
Yeah, no, she's massive. I mean, being on the Footy Show, she's had quite a lot of. Does seem like she's had a lot of stuff in her life that's gotten attention outside of her professional career, or I guess adjacent to it. I mean, kind of famously, She had an incident where she was accused of being racist. Let me pull it up now. I think it was. Oh, that's right. She said
A Tonglen name, right?
Yeah, she said something that seemed like she was kind of making fun of, like a Pacific.
But good luck finding any Australian presenter, TV
exactly,
presenter particularly, who hasn't said or done something
exactly,
racist.
Exactly. It's actually a rite of passage. So here's the headline. 9 broadcaster, so this is from this year, has told the court that she did not engage in casual racism when she repeatedly laughed about the mispronunciation of Polynesian, Chinese, Indian, and Japanese. Oh my God, there's so many different nationalities there, names on the 2GB rugby league radio show. Oh,
Are you racist if you're making fun of every single person?
No, exactly. The perfect Australian media defense. I'm racist to everyone equally.
Exactly.
No. I mean, she does get covered a lot in kind of tabloids as well. That kind of speaks to her appeal as being known by everyone. Also, where she comes into my interest area is that she has been a vocal spokesperson for the government around their online anti-trolling laws, which for me kind of like, it had my antenna kind of like, going off, because she is, of course, like I said, related to the former senator, and she was happily going out there to spruik these online reforms. And now she said that she wants to be, a politician in the future, and she wants to go on Sky News, which I think is like, it's a pretty, as far as things go in terms of getting the Liberal Party base on side, I think turning up on Sky News a lot, being a friendly face probably goes a long way.
Yeah, I mean, look, if she does want to get into politics, she's doing it the right way. She's definitely making all the right choices and taking all the right steps. And I look forward to probably her winning a seat in not this election, but maybe most likely the next one, and us having to contend with her politics then.
Can't wait. So for this episode, we thought we'd finish off the year with a bit of fun and go through some questions from our audience. Thank you very much to everyone who submitted them. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Some of them are about News Corp, some of them are about us. And there's some good ones here. Sami, first of all, here's a question. How would the conversations go between the PM's office and the Daily Telegraph about positive news stories behind the scenes? Maybe I'll broaden that out and say, how do you think that, do you have any insight into the relationship between politicians' offices and news publications about how they get these exclusives and drops?
I mean, having worked in newsrooms, particularly in Pakistan, where something like this is quite common as well, one of the things that you start to realize is it's not usually, or it doesn't need to be after a while, a formal request or even a wink, wink, nudge, nudge request. It just becomes a kind of expectation. So, if they know that if you're part of the Liberal Party government and the Parliament, the Prime Minister's office, you know that you've got a certain kind of beneficial relationship with certain media outlets, and they get access to certain stories before anyone else, and in return they publish some of your press releases or backgrounding information without looking at it too closely. And so that's largely how it works. With you'll send them a press statement saying, "Oh, this is what we're releasing," and then they'll just publish it without really analyzing it, critiquing it very much. These things aren't really a formal, phone call going, "Hey, I need you to publish this to make me look good." A document goes out, it gets published, and therefore the looking good is an inadvertent side effect.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's all these things are transactional. Like I'm not sure that anyone in the PM's office or other offices has a deep affection for Rupert Murdoch and News Corp. What they have is a deep affection for using their their megaphone, their platform to try and secure them election wins. And so I think that they view it, there has been a cozy relationship, and they kind of understand it that, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I'll give you stuff that no one else has. That means that people have to read your papers if they want to know, for instance, about the new online safety laws or whatever things get dropped in the newspaper every week. And the flip side is, well, if you want to get those, you can't be too critical. You can't be unfair about how you cover as well. Otherwise, you'll kind of get cut out. So yeah, I think that like the stories would be like, they are very chummy, but that is, not unique to News Corp either. Like,
yes,
there's this thing where the higher up kind of in a lot of political reporting, for those people who get access, who get those stories, they become very friendly. And I think that is to some extent natural because, from a journalist, and in fact, from both perspectives, they both want each other to like them to try and affect their coverage. So they hang out with them, they, drink with them, they meet with them, and all of that ends up, I think, whether intentionally or not, kind of shaping their coverage. So yeah, I don't think it's you get a kind of like you must print this and then I will give you something good. But I do think that they that there's a kind of real sense that I'm doing this so I get good stories, and maybe if I'm not critical, well, someone else will be critical. But it's important just to get this stuff out there. So yeah, kind of suits all parties.
Absolutely.
Okay, next question. Do News Corp journalists discuss in private all the bad stuff their company does, or are they blind to it?
Oh man, that's a really good question. Like, is there cognitive dissonance or not? I think is the real question being asked here, right? Like, do they, when they get together, think about the things that they're doing and the repercussions that they have and the lies, like, do they go, oh, I totally lied about something, or, oh, I totally destroyed this person's life on purpose? Or is there a level of cognitive dissonance that makes them feel self-righteous about their actions and thus then blind to the repercussions of those? I think the cognitive dissonance kicks in. I think if you're doing what you do for long enough, you don't see the wrong in what you're doing because, you wouldn't be able to, live with your own hypocrisy. So we convince ourselves of the righteousness of our actions.
I mean, the first thing is that, and we've said this before, I think, probably at least the majority of journalists at News Corp do not kind of get sucked into the kind of worst parts of it. And I think that there are a lot of great journalists
very few people here.
Yeah, exactly. The majority of them, just want to do their job and are mostly allowed to do their job unencumbered. And that kind of means that, those people, and having spoken to a lot of them, they wince at that kind of stuff. They ignore it. They roll their eyes. They say, well, like there's only so much I can do. And other media companies have their own kind of like rough edges as well. And so kind of through all that, they just say, I'm just doing my bit. I have my head down. I'm doing good work. And I can't, if I'm a reporter who works at the, like big advertiser or whatever, I can't spend my life stressing about, what Peter Credlin is saying on Sky News. And I totally understand that. And then as for the people who are, I think, doing that kind of stuff that I think most people are most critical of, the kind of like, this week we didn't do Bad News Corp, Good News Corp, but there was, James Morrow, a frequent appearee on these podcasts, in terms of being mentioned at least. He had this, he gave grades to all the people this year. And one of the things he said was he gave Scott Morrison an A, which is an absurd thing because he had a shocking year. And the second thing is he also said that, Scott Morrison was able to neutralize many of his problems early on. And then in brackets, like the vaccine rollout, Brittany Higgins. And people like, you're saying he neutralized Brittany Higgins, who, of course, has accused someone of rape and has opened up a massive discussion on the broken culture inside Canberra and to do particularly with alcohol and sex and all that stuff. To say that, that he neutralized it is not only true, but it's also just like deeply disrespectful. So about those types, the people who really are those like top, culture warriors, company men and women who do that. I mean, I think, they to some extent know what they're doing, but they view it all as a game. It's a game and it's power and it's politics, and they are, look, they know that they're doing it, but they kind of believe it's all worth it and they'll do whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Gerard Henderson spends too much time thinking about how he might actually sound to anyone who doesn't like him. Same thing with Joe Hildebrand. I think the people who work with Joe Hildebrand must be rolling their eyes, but Joe Hildebrand doesn't have a moment of self-reflection. And I think that's why he is Joe Hildebrand.
Yeah, it's all, and I mean, like, again, this isn't, just kind of limited to, News Corp, but I mean, like, you really see the worst instincts of it in many of the top publications in News Corp. It's just like, these are people who want to protect the way that things are. They want to protect people in power who they like. They want to protect people who like them, who are often, well-paid media elites. And
Yes.
they just want to essentially run interference, make it easy for the people that they're sympathetic to, rather than tell the truth as is their duty as a journalist. And that's kind of how they
Well,
get
I mean,
their
there's
job.
a level of self-delusion, right? If and which I'm possibly guilty of. When I earlier said in this very episode about how when I was working at the ABC, I was diligent about my neutrality because that's I'm professional. Who knows? That's probably me being completely delusional, and I was quite blatantly, obviously leftist in every single thing that I did and all the coverage that I put out there and all the stories that I covered. And I am fooling myself when I think that I was trying to be neutral. And similarly, someone like this, Joe Hildebrand or whoever, or Gerard Henderson or Bernard Keane might be going, not Bernard Keane, sorry, any of these people who write for the Australian, they might think, look at how neutral I'm being, while the rest of us are going, clearly you're
no
biased.
way. No, I know you're just testing this out, but I mean, they know what they're doing, and
Yes.
they know what they're doing. They know what their job is there to do. And it's how these structures, these power structures, they reinforce themselves. You couldn't be someone who was a socialist reporter who was working for the Daily Telegraph, who would work their way up and become the political editor. You just couldn't. And so, you get selected by these structures, and when you're there, you're expected what to do, all these kinds of things. And I think, no one thinks they're evil, of course. And many of these people are complex, but they know that they're out there to kind of, swing a political way, write in a way that's favorable to certain interests, even just hit notes that portray current events in certain ways, fear of immigration, fear of having personal freedoms taken away, all that stuff that is highly political, that kind of comes with the job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question. Will there ever... Oh, this is a good one. Will there ever be a movie made on Australian Murdoch and their influence? And I'm going to add a little bit of spice, Sammy. Who would you have cast in that movie?
Oh, so, okay. I don't think the movie will be made. I don't think the movie's got the reason it has got anything to do with their influence in Australia. I think it's more just the fact that Succession has now told the tale so well that, anyone hoping to make their own version of it is now standing under the shadow of Succession, and that shadow is very strong and very deep and dark. And so, I don't think we're going to see one, at least anytime soon. Maybe there'll be some dramas that the next generation of Murdochs will have that will then become a news story in and of itself, and someone in Australia can tell it. I think Succession has told the tale too well. If, however, there was one to be made, I mean, this might be me betraying my own lack of knowledge of Australian actors, but I was going to say Sam Neill, but actually I think it would be more interesting to cast against type. And I would say instead the actor that you put into this to play Rupert Murdoch, which is obviously the main character that we're talking about over here, is Michael Caton.
Interesting.
Who starred as Daryl Kerrigan in the Castle, the lead actor from the Castle.
Yeah.
You put someone like that in, who's got such a great understanding of comedic timing and comedic energy and everything, and then you make them sinister. Oh, they would nail it.
Oh, yeah. Hey, actually, that's a good point. I was thinking that there is that Bombshell, which is that 2019 film that was about Fox News in the US as well, which I actually haven't seen. I should watch it, but that does have something to do with
the one with what's his name? Russell Crowe as the founder of Fox News.
No,
is that
no? I think that's a different one. You're talking about
that's the TV series I'm thinking of. Sorry,
yeah. Russell Crowe, who. The Loudest Voice, where he played Roger Ailes. Yeah, I saw that.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
I enjoyed that. Okay, here is my stunt casting. If there was an Australian movie or TV show about Australian News Corp, tell me what you think about this. Kind of vibing off the same, idea that you had, which is the idea of finding a comedic actor to then turn that power to then playing a serious role. What about Sean McAuliffe playing Andrew Bolt?
Oh, that is a great choice.
I think that would be really fun. I think he could do
That
something
would
with
be
that.
really nice.
Maybe
I like that
we'll
idea
pitch
a
him on it.
lot.
We'll send him an email so if he wants to do it. We'll
All right,
become
great,
producers. Okay. And this kind of gets onto what we were talking about before. I really want to know whether you think News Corp is really the home of Australian hatchet job journalism, or if other outlets love the hatchet just as much. Basically, is it unfair to single out News Corp for this shitty practice?
I mean, look, you get the thing where many people often assume that Daily Mail is published by News Corp. I've seen it very often where people get
Yeah,
angry
that's
at the
true.
Daily Mail and go bloody Rupert Murdoch. And no, it's a completely different ownership. It is very much its own beast, and it's owned by someone entirely different, and it has nothing to do with News Corp. And I would argue that there is no one worse, no journalistic enterprise in the Western world worse for society than the Daily Mail. Having been the subject of their coverage myself, I know the influence and impact it has. And so, yes, I think, to say that the only people who do tabloid hatchet journalism in Australia is News Corp is unfair. I think Daily Mail does it more effectively, and does it better, or worse rather, than News Corp could ever hope to do even.
Yeah, and the reason we decided to start this podcast was it was because we wanted to focus on the news and impact of News Corp, because it's not just that they do bad journalism, which is not true. They do a lot of great journalism.
Mm-hmm.
There's some bad journalism. It's more about the way that they are happy to direct their journalism, to focus on something, to use it like it's almost as if it's the Eye of Sauron, where they choose where to focus on it, and that kind of has an incredible power by focusing on an issue, by getting people to write about it. They can really actually drive a lot of social discussion, of discourse of politics. That's kind of why we do it. There is some bad journalism, and like we're happy to point it out. We're happy to point out the good stuff as well. But it's more complicated, at least to me, than like, are they a good or bad at journalism? I guess another question is, are they a good or bad influence on the whole? Now, maybe that's a bit more of a difficult question. And finally, Sammy. Actually, two more. We're getting a bit off it, but what are your thoughts on the Matrix sequels?
Oh man, they're so bad. They're so terrible. They utterly and completely ruined the legacy of the first Matrix. I saw the first Matrix the way it was meant to be seen, which is it had just come out the cinema. I was in America, a student at the time.
Yeah.
We went to watch something else, and no one knew about Matrix. There was no hype before the movie came out. So I walked into it with my roommate because we went to watch something else. Tickets were sold out. We're like, let's go see this sci-fi film. And walked out with our minds blown and our understanding of the universe changed fundamentally, right? And that was amazing. And then 2 and 3 took all those Gnostic philosophies and this understanding of reality as a hologram, and all these kind of chaos magic meets quantum physics kind of theories that the Wachowskis had put into it, and just turned it into really boring, dragged out philosophy 101 bullshit with special effects that don't stand the test of time compared to the first movie as well, which again did so much better. So I'm a big fan of the first movie, and I think the second and third, I pretend like they don't exist. And when I watch this new movie, I'm going to watch it as if the second and third movies never happened.
I am going to be controversial here and say I actually thought the second one was quite good. I think it gets a bad rap.
Why? What did you like about it?
I rewatched it probably a year ago, and it just I thought it was just a really good movie, and it suffers from coming after an excellent, one of the best movies. I mean, it's hard to express just how well the first movie holds up. 20 years later, but I think the second one's quite good. I didn't actually make it to the third, so I can't tell you. I am excited for the new ones. Okay, and final question, Sam. Yes. This is going to take all your expertise. I think you're the right person to answer this.
Mm-hmm. Bring it.
If a bear and a shark got into a fight, who would win?
Oh,
and we'll call it kind of neutral territory where it's like kind of like just under waist height water, so that the bear can kind of move mostly unencumbered, but the shark is able to move quite efficiently as well.
See, here's the thing. The environment makes all the difference. If it's a neutral environment where they both are at their best, I would, even though I have a great fear and respect for the shark, and we're assuming in this case it's a great white shark, I would still put money on the bear, because I think bear, the pure strength and fury of a bear when completely, uncontrolled, is a thing of wonder. And as a result, I think the shark gets a good bite in, takes a chunk out of the bear, possibly even wounding the bear for life, but the bear will continue to have life. I think once that bear gets his claws into the shark's a dead creature. There's no coming back from it.
Ooh,
What about you? Where do you put your money?
As usual, we're actually going to disagree on this one. I think in any environment where the shark can kind of move, I think that kind of necessitates that a bear is going to be not at its best. So I'm going to give this one to the shark, I think. But yeah, I would love to see it happen.
All right, yeah, I would love to see it happen.
yeah. That is it for this year for us. Thank you all so much for listening. It has been great, setting this up and start, getting to meet the community, getting to dive into this stuff. At times I was like, before we launched it, I was like, is there going to be enough? And then we have been like absolutely chock-a-block with stuff to talk about. So we are happy to keep it going into next year.
Absolutely.
Of course, if you haven't already subscribed, please do. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, just about anywhere. Join our Facebook group as well. Thanks to Natalie Sekulovska, our producer, Kevin McLeod for theme music, the ABC for the recordings from the archive, Ruby Innes for our artwork, and Sammy. A huge heartfelt thank you to you. It has been such a joy to do this with you. I've had a great time.
Thanks for asking me to do this, Cam. It's been so much fun ever since I've said yes. It's been endlessly entertaining watching all these news stories and developing a better understanding of the news landscape here in Australia. And to you and to all our listeners, Merry Christmas and
year.
Happy New Year.